from your listening device all the way into your agent's psyche. It's Real Estate Between the Lines with Brian Lee. Teaching you things you didn't know you needed to know to help you become a legendary agent and turn your clients into raving fans.
Welcome to Real Estate Between the Lines. I'm your host, Brian Lee. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. You are in for a treat. During the break, we had a little bit of a skip or whatever, a little bit of an issue. We got through it, so I am charged up now. And with that, charging with that kind of attitude, I am all about helping the real estate industry still. That one agent at a time. I've got some passion for it. Guys, you better be ready. You're listening to it. With me, as always, is my beautiful, tolerant, and being very kind right now, co-host, Cate.
Hello.
Welcome.
Hello.
And Christian, to my left, right in front of Cate, is with us as well.
Hey,
You
I
ready
got my
for this?
seatbelt on. I'm ready.
That's right.
Yes.
Buckle up, buckaroo. So today, episode 36 is You Did What? With your ownership. What? What are we even talking about here? So today we get a little bit technical. You know, I'm a real estate pre-licensing instructor, and every once in a while, I like to pepper in a few things that are from the pre-licensing, but still extremely important for agents to be very cognizant of that they forget. So today we're talking about tenants in common and joint tenancy. I mean, what could be more fun than forms of ownership, guys?
Hearing about all the lawsuits that go along with
I was actually pausing for a minute because I was like waiting for you, like, okay, skip episode. I'm just giving you that opportunity now. Stick with this for a minute. I promise it's not going to be bad. But we will be talking about different forms of ownership, why it's important, and things to be cognizant of as an agent. And the weekly song that ties into this is by a group called The Who. And the song is Who Are You?
I like it.
It was from the album Who Are You? Ironically named. Released August 1978. That
Kind of ran out of ideas there, didn't I?
As I find so many of them do. It's like, after so many albums, like,
let's call it The Who. How about that? Call the song The Who. We are The Who, and it's on the album The Who.
Not to be confused with Who, or wasn't it Who?
Guess Who?
Guess Who. Guess Who. That was what it was. Yes.
The Guess Who.
So Who Are You? The song is track 9 off of that album. The length was 6 minutes and 21 seconds. Anybody remember CSI? Man, CSI always had a Who song on it, and I just loved it. This was from that. And I just remember I grew up listening to the song anyway, but I was a huge CSI fan. Loved all the different ones, the CSI Miami with David Caruso and all that, all those different ones. I just loved it, and they always had a Who song. I just always got into that.
I did not know that about you.
I dug it, baby.
David Caruso. David Caruso has a specific acting style, doesn't he?
He does. He really does. And what's funny,
Kind of tilts his head and kind of looks up.
if you remember, he was in First Blood, the first Rambo
was he?
movie.
I didn't know that.
He was one of the He was one of the police officers. He was
really?
one of the sheriffs. He wasn't
Really?
Brian Denny. He was the main sheriff
Yeah.
of the thing. But David Caruso was one of his minions, and he was part of that thing. I always remember that too. So David
check that
Caruso and
out.
I go back pretty far. You know,
I'm not going to be checking it out.
No.
He was in
I'm not
Jade.
going to lie to you, Cate. Jade.
You guys might remember from the movie 40-Year-Old Version. They're like, be David Caruso in Jade. It's like, hey, what's up? Anyway, we digress. Other than if you're not screaming like Roger Daltrey right now. Like, let me go on. Ownership means a lot to our clients. It really does. When we're talking about ownership, thinking about their real estate that they own.
This episode has it all, doesn't it? Joint tenancy, David Caruso, all the topics no one wants to hear about.
I told you,
Somebody
agents.
might.
I told you, agents, you are in for a treat on this one. You're going to get the plethora.
All you David Caruso fan club people who are also real estate agents who... Never mind. Doesn't matter. Let's go.
So our ownership to our clients, there's an emotional connection. There's a psychological connection. There's a financial piece to it, but there's also a legal piece that is very important that gets overlooked sometimes. And that nearly most clients don't have any clue what kind of ownership they have. They don't even think about it. It's not a question that gets asked of them. They don't think about it. All they say is that real estate, that house right there with that roof and at this address, this is mine, but not realizing that there's some legal ramifications to that, both good and bad, from tax taxes, again, from all different kinds of things. So understanding that is really important. And so as agents, we really should take the attitude that we need to talk with our clients about this. And I do want to be clear here for a second, too, is that this type of conversation is a legal conversation. So as an agent, I'm not suggesting that we are going to be an attorney here or make the suggestion, hey, you should take it as a tenant in common or joint tenant or tenancy by the entirety, whatever it would be, but still just to bring it up to the client that when you buy this thing, there's this legal thing that you probably wouldn't even recognize, that you've never even heard before, but it is important. And here's the brief synopsis. And that's kind of what we're going to cover today, is that brief synopsis. And then to say to the client, you need to talk to an attorney. You need to talk to an accountant to find out what is the best for you, because it does matter.
Absolutely.
And I put in my notes here too is that this gets to be an issue more often than what agents sometimes realize. We've dealt with all kinds of situations. I mean, in our office about a year ago, maybe we had a situation where it was a couple that was going through a divorce, and they were in the process of getting the divorce. And I think we were the listing agent on this.
We were, and the divorce had been finalized, and it had been maybe a couple of months. The ex-husband was still living in the home, but they hadn't changed anything with the ownership of the home. And like I said, ex-husband was living there. Ex-wife had moved somewhere else, and unfortunately, very tragically, the ex-husband passed away very unexpectedly.
And terrible.
Threw a wrench in a ton of stuff. It was crazy how it affected everything.
All because of the legal ownership and what people just didn't even realize. They again, in that situation, we're divorced. We've settled this thing. Ex-husband had the right to the property, I think, if I remember right.
Yeah, to stay.
According to the divorce decree,
Correct.
he owned it. But still, from the standpoint of the legal ownership, they both still owned it, and they owned it as joint tenancy. And if anybody ever remembers joint tenancy, we'll get into it in here in a minute. It has that right of survivorship, which means that the ex-wife gets it. So now we have a divorce decree that says one thing. We have this joint tenancy that says completely something else. And man, that was not fun to work through. Fortunately, the families kind of worked together, because it did involve a lot of different people on that one, and the attorneys. We worked through it, but it was not fun. So this is why this is so important. So here's the technical piece that we're going to get into. Let me work through a couple definitions real quick. I'm not going to get too far in the weeds on this, but just to remind everybody some of the main pieces, that there are 4 types of ownership that we're looking at with regard to real estate. The first one is severalty, which means that we're looking at a single entity, a single owner that owns this property, that I own it by myself. Cate always reminds me that she actually owns her house. The house that we live in together.
I don't remind you of this.
Okay, maybe I'm the one that brings it up. But anyway, the home is only in her name. Yeah. And we did that intentionally. It wasn't that, I mean, there wasn't like, we joke about it every once in a while, but there was actually legal and a financial and a liability thing.
And a power trip that I could, keep saying, it's my house.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, and you never remind me. Yeah, there you go, guys. You heard it. I never hear it. But she owns it all by herself. We are married, of course. I do have a legal right to the property through that marriage. But as far as the ownership, if you looked at the deed, it is in her name. She owns it in severalty. So it's a single owner. And then you do have forms of co-ownership where you have 2 or more parties that own the same piece of real estate. And the 3 primary types that we talk about are tenant in common, joint tenancy, and tenancy by the entirety. So there are other forms too. There's legal life estates, there's trusts, there's business entity ownerships, and we can get into those in the future, and all of them have their benefits. But talking about co-ownership specifically, because that's where this really gets to be kind of crazy, is to discuss first what a tenant in common is. And there's 2 key pieces to always be mindful of when we're making this choice, when the client is saying that I want to be a tenant in common, and this is the reason why. This is what you want to take into account. So the first one is that as a tenant in common, our ownership is separate. We both, or all the parties, own the same piece of real estate. We're not physically cutting it down in the middle or something like that, but just as far as the interest, the piece that I have, it is separate from yours. So what that means is that with my part, with my piece, I can do anything with it. I can sell it to somebody else. I can mortgage it. I can will it. I can give it to somebody else if I choose, and that I can do that on my own. I don't need my partner. I don't need this co-owner with me to make that decision. So that's a big piece.
And a lot of tenants, a lot of that situation with the tenants in common would be investors is a very common one, but you can be a husband and wife and be tenants in common. You don't have to have joint tenancy. So
and that's and that's a great point, is that, and we'll kind of dive into that a little bit, is that it's tenant in common is not a common, that's like a redundancy.
Typical?
It's not typical for married couples to choose. And there's reasons for that, but there are absolutely times when a married couple would certainly want to consider tenant in common for various reasons, and just different ways to handle that. So that's a great point that you bring up, is that just because we're married does not mean we should be joint tenants or tenant by the entirety. Tenant in common might make sense. The last piece of tenant in common to always remind or to remember is that with a tenant in common, we can divide this up, the interest of the property, in any way we want. It's the only one that we can split up in any unequal share. So let's say that I do all the work, like I do around the house. I do all the work, right, honey? I take out the trash.
Goodness.
I clean up the dishes all the time. I make dinner.
You grocery shop now?
My grocery shop is terrible. What she makes me go through, guys. She sits around and eats bonbons all day long. No, I'm just kidding. But let's just say
Twix bars. Thank you. Twix.
She's Twix bars. Shout out to Twix. Yes. She loves you guys. Do you like the right or the left side of the Twix bar? Does it matter?
No, it does not matter.
Twix makes a big deal. I always thought that it was funny that they made a big deal.
No.
Apparently, people have a big deal about
I like them in the
Twix.
refrigerator. I do like it that way, though.
But with the tenant in common, we can split up any way we want. So again, maybe I put up all the work, I put up some money, so I want 75% of the interest, and my co-owner says that's fine. I know you're doing this, and I'll take 25%. We can split it up any way that we want. It could be 90-10, 70-30, 80-20. It can be 50-50. We can choose any number that we want. We can decide this. If you don't decide it, though, and again, here's the other big piece of this, is that if you don't decide it, it's automatically assumed to be split equally. So if there are two people, it is automatically set 50-50. You can choose something other than that. You can choose the 70-30, 80-20, whatever. But at the end of the day, it is automatically set at 50-50. So make sure you're asking those questions.
Okay. And you can do that straight with the title company, right? I mean, if you have investors and they say, we want to divide it up, whatever, 70-30, just let them know and they'll create the documentation.
Yeah,
for
exactly.
That,
that's just a communication that you would have with the title company, the attorney, whoever is drafting this deed. There's language that they would write up that would explain that my interest is, 70-30 or whatever it might be. So we can easily do that. But exactly. So it's something that you can take on there.
Well, and speaking of investors,
and
I have a little side note tangent.
You're right, B. We're picking up speed. Things are gonna be great.
I am right, but also
side note tangent.
It's a side note tangent with Cate.
Well, I've worked with
I
a
was
lot
on
of.
a roll there. Go ahead, honey. You go right ahead.
I will. Thank you very much.
You own the home, so go ahead and take control of the podcast too.
Thanks for buying the groceries, honey.
I like how you just take time off when she does the side note. You just lean back,
He does.
get a drink.
He doesn't even listen.
Again, I don't even get a choice that it happens. Go ahead.
Well, he usually knows most of this information. But I've worked with a lot of investors, and when you work with investors, you tend to show some questionable homes, we'll say that. So I was going to kind of share, there are a couple experiences that I've had. I've gotten fleas twice from showing
Like
homes.
personally?
And you wonder why
Yeah.
to back off?
Yeah.
Well,
Go
they
ahead.
were all over my clothes and whatnot. And then, thankfully we were able to get rid of them before they infested the house. But we didn't know.
Wow.
I mean, all the carpet had been one of them, the carpet had been ripped out. And we're like, why would they do that? We walk outside, bing, 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 bing. Oh my gosh.
Wow.
It was
That's
kind of crazy.
gross.
But that's happened twice.
That's pretty gross.
I've had to use my stomach to unlock to on a lockbox in sub-zero temperatures. It was frozen.
Are you a belly dancer too? This is
That
skills
was
I'm not aware of.
cold. But it worked. I did that for my
You just
client.
perked up during the side note
Yeah,
tangent.
right.
Exactly.
He's back at the mic and everything.
Exactly.
The visual just entered my mind.
I just pulled up my shirt. It worked though. The
I'm
lockbox
listening.
was
Yeah.
frozen,
Uh-huh.
and
I'm listening.
I
I'm
thawed it
fully
out.
present.
Yep.
Oh
Yep.
my gosh. Let's see what else. I have walked in on quite a few homes that have had squatters. One of which the squatter was still in, and he jumped out the kitchen window.
Nice.
I did not go in that house. And it was that was a $14,000 house. It was
Wow.
interesting.
Nice.
He had a space heater with an extension cord to the neighbor's house. That's how he was heating
That's
it.
hilarious.
Classy touch.
Yep,
Exactly.
yep.
I've gotten the heebie-jeebies. I mean, like, have you ever been in a house and you're just like, something feels off here? No,
No.
you don't.
I'm not a wuss. Like, I mean, I don't get the heebie-jeebies. Is what I meant to say.
He has no intuition, is what he meant.
Clearly, I don't. I just dig the hole.
I've yet to find a dead body. I pray to God I never.
Thank
that never
goodness.
happens. I found
That's-
dead animals, plenty. Like there was.
You sound disappointed.
Well, I don't want to. That's the one thing that. Oh,
She's very morbid, guys.
I'll watch it on TV, but I don't want to. I don't want that. No. I've heard of people finding people passed away, but anyway, that's all. So, haven't you had some weird experiences?
Are we done? Are we closing this? I know.
Never. Yeah, let's move on.
Fine.
We're picking up speed. Things are gonna be great. Wait.
Side note tangent.
It's a side note tangent with Cate.
So just to recap, the belly dancer thing, you had him on the edge of his seat.
There wasn't more
Everything
to that.
else.
I know.
I'm still like totally have that visual in my head. You pulling up your shirt and sticking your stomach.
I sat there for probably 2 to 3 minutes to warm it up. It worked.
I don't know why that is so funny to me.
I did not want to drive home,
No, I
wait
get
for the
it.
weather to warm up, and drive back. I was like, we're getting in this house one way or another.
Joint tenancy.
Yeah.
That's what we're getting into next. Joint tenancy. So joint tenancy, the
thing I love about side, you just never know where they're going to go. Side note tangents,
Exactly.
It's like you're never sure.
and usually they
Simple.
They go nowhere.
They go
They're
so well.
pointless. As I said, I'm
Simple,
full of
silly,
useless information.
provocative.
Joint tenancy.
We promised all the agents a great show, and I think we're giving it to them. They're getting it. Everybody listening right now is like, "Wow, I am
Brian
so
wants
glad."
technical. Spice.
Anyway,
Hold on, we have an email coming in there saying, "Can you get to joint tenancy?"
Thank you. Thank you.
That's from Sally in San Diego.
Sally in San Diego. Thank you, Sally, for breaking.
And she said also, if you could talk about unequal shares and ownership title, that'd be done.
That would be fantastic. Let's get to that right now.
Okay.
Thank you for Sally for writing in.
No problem.
So joint tenancy.
I'm monitoring it's coming in to the BTL inbox.
With joint tenancy, we also recognize the phrase right of survivorship. So basically what we're saying here is that the last person standing is the final owner. So here we have multiple owners. We can have 2, 3, 4 owners. The last person that is alive is the remaining owner. So as each of these people pass away, let's say that there's 3 people that are owners of this property, and with that, they all own a third share of this property. One of them passes away. The 2 surviving members are now 50% owners. It's set up that way. So that is a key piece of joint tenancy, is that they have that undivided interest. Unlike the tenant in common, where I can sell off my part, I can will my part away, I can put it in a probate situation or whatever. With joint tenancy, I don't have that right. When I pass away, it immediately gets absorbed by the remaining tenant or joint tenancy owners.
And so with that, if there are 3 owners originally, and you each have, you don't really have a third ownership, but somewhat, one passes away, it then goes to 50-50-ish.
Yeah, exactly.
In a way.
So that's
but it's
another
not
piece.
50-50. You own it together, but it's
but as far as the interest is concerned, you do. So again, in the example of having 3 people, each of you have a 1/3 ownership there.
Mm-hmm.
One of the 3 people passes away. Now it's a 1/2 ownership. I own half, and you own half. That by definition, and when you have joint tenancy, it has to be equal. You cannot choose how you want to split it up. Maybe I did do all the work. Maybe I did buy all the groceries, clean up the dishes, do all the things around the house like I do, and I still only get 25% because that's the kind of love I get. That if we're joint tenants, I get 50% no matter what. Ha ha ha. Anyway, so
You're
just
lucky you
be
get
aware
anything.
of that thing, that you don't have the choice, that whoever your partners are, you have an equal ownership. And if you're saying, gosh, I deserve 75%, I think I should have 75, then joint tenancy is not the one for you. So be aware of that. And again, there could be reasons for that, whether they're investors or even, spouses. Again, too, joint tenancy is a very common selection for a married couple. But if the husband and wife agree that honey, this was your house, and we agree that you get 75%, joint tenancy is not the right way to do it. There's other things you can do.
yeah.
Again, it can be owned by married couples, by unmarried people, by anybody. But again, usually when we think of right of survivorship, you think about who you want to be owner with, because if you're the one that passes away, who gets this thing when you pass away? So, if we're married, I'd want my spouse, because I'd want my spouse to have my half of the property.
But
because
how
I
do we
love
own
her.
this property?
So anyway, we have that. Which
I would mention on that too, though, just as it's not a side note tangent, but a point would be if a maybe parents and a child, something like that, if they kind of want to will the property to their child, nice way to do it without having to go through all the hurdles of probate and estate and all of that. But there are risks that go with that too. But that is one way they can add their child
absolutely
to the
absolutely
ownership.
and that's a great point, is again just There's not a right or wrong answer here, guys.
Yeah.
There is not. Well, I shouldn't say that. There is a right or wrong answer, but the right answer is to go out and talk to people about your client's specific situation, because again, what I'm telling you and what you guys may be not even aware of is that a lot of this stuff happens in the background when the client doesn't make the choice and they're married. Joint tenancy is going to be probably the automatic process, automatic thing that gets selected for them, that they didn't have any say in the matter at all, or that they weren't asked, or they just didn't know. It's like, yeah, whatever, we'll do. You're saying it's joint tenancy, that's fine, and not realizing the ramifications of it. So you should ask the question so that way they make the best choice and get the right answer for them. The third and final type of
Wait, we just got a question from Bobby in Walla Walla, Washington.
Walla Walla, Washington, all the way from Walla Walla.
Walla Walla, yeah.
Yeah, I love that.
He wants to know about tenancy by entirety.
Thank you.
Can you help him out?
Great question. All the way from Walla.
Yeah, straight out of the BTL inbox.
Did he happen to run into Bugs Bunny when he was out there?
He didn't say.
I know Bugs Bunny went
Do
out to
you
Walla
want me
Walla.
to email him back?
We'll get to that in the breakout session. Tenancy by the entirety. Thank you. Great question. Is that it is similar to joint tenancy, but it is reserved exclusively for married couples. So this is something that kind of gets into another legal piece, and I'm not an attorney here, but in some states, and Indiana is one of them, they recognize marriage as being a union of two people. So even though there's two physical human beings there, when they join into marriage, that they are one unit. So it's one entity that owns this property together, and that's where tenancy by the entirety comes in, is that because they are one unit that's inseparable, it's kind of like a severalty situation where it's one owner, but we still recognize that they're two human beings. So tenancy by the entirety is reserved for those married people.
And this is that situation that we talked about in the beginning where it was a husband and wife purchased the property together. It was tenancy by the entirety, not joint tenancy, technically, because they were husband and wife. They got divorced, and once that happened, they became tenants in common.
Okay.
So that's what ended up happening and how that shifted here, because like you said, the state recognized them as one unit, as an entity, and then when that entity separated, by default, it went to tenants in common.
There you go, and that's exactly. I do remember that now. That's exactly
a little more, because his family had to get involved to sell his portion. Thankfully, everybody was very amicable, and it was just a really sad situation overall, but they were able to work through it. But this is a very common thing that in today's day and age with divorce happening, talk to your clients. If you hear of somebody who's going through a divorce or they have just finished a divorce and they still own the home together, they now probably own the home as tenants in common, not by joint tenancy or tenancy by the entirety. So very, very important thing to discuss with them.
Absolutely. It's vital. Again, and they're going to want advice from accountants, from attorneys, because there are taxation things. I mean, forget ownership for a minute. Forget the legal piece of this. There are tax reasons. I mean, that's one of the reasons why Cate and I have that separate ownership, or that she owns the property, is partially for taxation, partly for liability. I mean, from a taxation standpoint, I'm kind of a big deal. I mean, maybe you guys have heard of me before. It's the real estate between the lines with Brian Lee. So then again, I have dozens of people that are dying to listen to me right now.
I just have a side note.
Bobby and Sally, for example. At least two.
Exactly. But anyway, the point is that I have some businesses, I have the school, I have some things like that. That there's some money there, there's some income, and there's also some liability there. I mean, I'm at the school, somebody trips and falls and sues me. There's a liability there that could fall down to me. So we try to shield some of that from the standpoint that we do separate the house. I'm not an owner of the house. You trip and fall at the school, you can sue me, but you're not going to get my house, because guess what? I don't own a house. So again, that's just an example.
You're saying there's less liability with me, right? That's what you're saying. There's
also probate issues that we want to talk about too. that when somebody passes away, untimely, or if they just terribly, God, that would be the worst day, like the worst single day of my life. Now the days following, anyway, but what is? I love my wife. I swear I do.
Gosh,
I love my wife so much.
We have fun.
So anyway, but just when you pass away, again, probate, different things, again, trusts and wills and things like that can really change all this. So all that's very important.
Yeah, I would say, just to kind of mention, talk to your clients before closing, before the day before closing. Try to talk to them a couple weeks before closing. If you have more than one client involved, how do they want to take ownership? I don't care if they're married or they are engaged or whatever it is. They need to have that that discussion, and they don't even know that they need to have that discussion. So bring that up to them, give them an explanation of each of the options, and then suggest they consult with an attorney or the title company to figure out what works for them, to make sure that they're making an educated decision on how they're going to hold ownership, because it can go all different ways down the road, and they want to make sure that they made the decision. You didn't make it for them. Agreed.
Again, and kind of tidying it up as we were talking about that situation of that poor gentleman that did pass away. I mean, he was very young. I mean, he was in his 20s. It was a tragic situation. Nobody plans for that, but again, just it's a reality of life. We don't get out of this place alive. So again, just thinking about that. The quote for the week.
Lamont. From Ontario.
All the way from Canada. See, we are global. I told you I'm a big deal.
Yeah, he wants to know if there's a quote of the week.
There is, all the way from
the inbox. I have exactly 3 messages.
The timing is already. Just impeccable.
It is impeccable. I don't know how he knew, but Lamont from Ontario.
Lamont, I do have a quote of the week for you, and awesome. This is going out to Lamont in Ontario. So thank you for writing in, Lamont. Your quote of the week.
Are they French up there? Is it Lamont? Maybe it's Lamont.
That's a great question. I don't speak French. I speak a little Spanish. Maybe it's
is it
Lamont?
French? Would be Quebec, I guess would be French.
Yeah,
I don't know about Ontario. Anyway,
Lamont. Now we're just insulting a whole.
Yeah.
We're Producer Christian at producerchristian.com.
Yes, right.
That's the email you want to send those emails to.
That's going to bounce.
The weekly quote for Lamont is, be intentional in who you are. Going through life unaware of what makes you special serves no one. Love that quote. Is one I made up myself, so I kind of like that.
I love that.
Serve yourself, serve your clients, your business, your soul needs it. Helping people to understand these things so that they get through this, because so many people don't ask the questions. Be aware of what makes you special.
One agent at a time. We helped 3 today, which is kind of we're out of our comfort zone.
Right. Sally, Bobby, and Lamont.
One.
But hey, but it's all over the world, isn't it? It's
That's
Washington
true.
and Walla Walla.
Soon we'll be intergalactic.
Yeah, San Diego. That's the other one.
We are working toward the West Coast.
Yeah.
In closing, is there anybody else asking about the closing?
No, nobody asked about the closing.
That means they want us to go on.
Yeah.
Is that it?
So in closing, remember that the main types of legal ownership are severalty, tenant in common, joint tenancy, and tenancy by the entirety. Remember what they are, that each of them have their pros and cons. What works for one client might not work for another. That this is a technical piece, agents. I'm not suggesting that you get into the depths of this, but just bring it up, talk to your clients, make them aware that, hey, there's a choice that you have here, and here are the options. Figure out what the best one is. I'll guide you as much as I can, but get what the experts, and they'll help you there. Helping them is going to help you and make you just shine, because so many just don't ask these questions. You want to be awesome. You want to be legendary like Brian, whoever that awesome guy is. Emails coming in right now. Brian is super awesome.
Now, Sally wants to know how she can get a hold of you. You have that? Is that in the outro?
Sally, you can find me at Brian at brianseeley.com.
Which I guess she knew because she emailed us twice.
Plot hole.
Continuity. Where's my continuity guy?
Guys, we're out of here, okay? Thank you for listening. We welcome all your questions you can get to us. Just reach out to Sally. She knows how to find us. Lamont in Ontario. Bobby in Walla Walla, Washington. Thank you, guys. Take care and make your day legendary.
You've been listening to Real Estate Between the Lines with Brian Lee. If you'd like to learn more about becoming a legendary agent, be sure to visit us at brianseeley.com and sign up to hear about upcoming workshops and events. Now go out there and turn your clients into raving fans.